Hello and welcome to the fourth seminar in the 2016 Framework for Improving Student Outcomes Twilight Series, which is co-hosted by the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership and the Improvement and Accountability Branch Performance Division in the Regional Services Group. My name's Sean Butler. I'm the Acting Director of the... Hello Viv, I've just been distracted by seeing you there. I'm the Acting Director in the Implementation Division. Viv was my former principal at Brunswick Secondary College. Welcome. And welcome to all of our colleagues on Polycom as well. Back to me. I'm the Acting Director in the Implementation Division in the Regional Services Group. I'm also substantively one of the principal team at Northcote High School. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk with you and to share with our panellists the topic of student voice. The headline for today's session is what our students can tell us about good teaching. Firstly, before we go on, I'd like to add my own acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land on which we stand, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I think because we're here to talk about student voice, we should also pay respects to elders of the future. The Framework for Improving Student Outcomes was one of the key reforms announced in September 2015 to support the education state targets. And FISO uses the latest research to talk about global best practice to help schools focus on the key areas that we know have the greatest impact on student learning. And within the education state vision, student voice is a key component. The FISO, the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes, encourages schools to make student voice a priority and to empower students to fully and proudly to participate in the life of their school. In Victorian schools, student voice is heard at the individual level through student representative councils and other mechanisms in schools. It's also heard in classrooms as students engage with their teachers and with each other. And at the state level, student voice is heard through the Victorian Student Representative Council, which is also called the VicSRC. The VicSRC is the peak body for secondary students in Victoria. There's no group better placed in our school system to talk about teaching and learning than students. And I'm really happy today that we've got 3 students with us who I'll introduce shortly. Students have a unique perspective on learning and teaching and schooling, and they have the opportunity to actively shape their own education when schools allow them to enact their student voice. Student voice is students actively participating in their school communities, the education system, contributing to decision-making processes in their schools and the decisions that affect them. It's about collectively influencing outcomes and putting forward their views, concerns and ideas. Student voice allows students to engage, participate, lead and learn, and really importantly for all of our educators, student voice is about students being able to provide feedback to their teachers and to their schools about the learning environment and their experience of learning every day in the classroom. Today we'll be hearing from 4 guest speakers about what makes for good teaching in our schools, and particularly hearing from our students that are here today. Our first presenter will be Leah Bramhill, who's the Senior Policy Officer in the EAL and Multicultural Unit of the Department of Education and Training, who helps oversee the Student Voice program. Following her will be presenters Krista Seddon, who's the manager of VicSRC, and some of the executive members of the VicSRC. We have Gerard Felipe from Frankston High School, Spencer Davies from Footscray City College, and Danai Harawa, also from Frankston High School. Today's session will consist of some short presentations from each of our panel members, followed by a Q&A panel session, which I'll facilitate, and certainly I hope that this will stimulate further discussions in our schools and amongst us. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Leah. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming this evening to discuss what I think is a very important issue in the education state, student voice, and welcome to all my colleagues on the Polycom there, and a very special welcome to the VicSRC and to the student panellists this evening. So I'm going to, the idea of me speaking first is to sort of set the scene about what student voice is, what the department's commitment is to student voice, and how we can work with partner organisations such as the VicSRC to further promote student voice. So I'm going to provide a bit of a background on student voice, some history of student voice and some emerging ideas in current research. some data on student voice practices in Victorian government schools, and then some discussion about how the department is indeed supporting student voice. So hopefully this will help you to start thinking about student voice and set the scene and provide some food for thought. And I'm more than happy to take questions at the end or perhaps through the facilitated session. So actually, this could be difficult with the colleagues on Polycom, but for those here, I'd just like to gauge the level of knowledge, interest in student voice. Could you please raise your hand if you are actively involved in your school in student voice activities? So, for example, if your school has an SRC, perhaps you are a teacher advisor, anything of that nature. Would you consider your school to be actively involved in promoting student voice, or are you wanting to commence that journey? So those that consider themselves already actively involved, could you raise your hands? Yeah, and anyone on the Polycom as well, you can raise your hand so I may be able to see. Okay, so it's a bit of a mixture. All right, so I'll work through my presentation. Could you see that, Krista? Yeah. About firstly, what is student voice? When we talk about we keep referring to student voice in the education state, and there's in my discussions with people across the department at schools from time to time, there's some misunderstandings about what it is and what it isn't. So it's a really broad concept. It encompasses a lot of different ideas and fields. So it's about participation, leadership, action, consultation, advocacy, evaluation and research. So there are many different activities within a school that are considered student voice. So it's not only having a student representative council in your school. It's far more than that. So it's really about empowering young people to actively shape their education. So we, both the VicSRC and the department, work really closely with the Deputy Premier, Minister Molino, around issues of student voice, and he's really, really committed to promoting student voice in Victorian government schools. So he talks about it in the sense that students should not just be the passive recipients of education, that they should actively be involved in shaping it. So the Minister meets with the students from the VicSRC and in other avenues quite regularly to discuss their ideas and for them to contribute to various government policies and programs. So student voice, another important point with student voice is that it's about the idea of representation and collective action. So it's about students working together to represent the views of their peers or a particular group, and taking that up the chain to inform change. So, look, it may be individual students advocating for a particular issue, but really student representative councils and the VicSRC are representative bodies. So it's about collective action rather than the views of one particular student. The idea is that SRCs and the VicSRC garner the views of their peers and then feed that up the chain. So collective action. So student voice activities, as I said, can include student representative councils and often do in schools. Sometimes they're referred to in primary schools as junior school councils, or they have many different names. You may not call it an SRC in your school. Also student-led activities, input into pedagogy, and I'll leave that to Krista to talk about a bit more. I assume you may be talking about the Teach the Teacher program. Student input into school council, volunteering, parliamentary programs, engaging in debates, social media, etc. So student voice really started to emerge in education in around the 60s, and it aligned with the student power movement. And then with the enactment of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, this was further promoted that students should have a say in the way that they're in all decisions, including education, in decisions that affect their lives. So when it first emerged, it was considered quite left-wing and progressive, but it was really it was about young people having this right to a voice, but there was some criticism around it that these rights didn't always come with responsibilities. I think student voice has changed a lot, and the way we talk about student voice now, particularly in the education state, really aligns with school improvement and improving student outcomes. And so that's why it's a key component of FISO, the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes. So there's been a lot of different bodies, both in Australia and internationally, have done research on student voice. The OECD in 2006 commissioned a report called Choice and Voice in Personalised Learning, which promoted this idea of student voice for school improvement. There's also a lot of fantastic work going on in the UK and in other parts of Europe around student voice. I've just been over there actually to do some research, and in particular Denmark, Copenhagen's doing some fantastic work on student voice. I think we could learn a lot from their practice. Okay, so Sean introduced the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, and you may indeed be working on the Empowering Students and Building School Pride Improvement Initiative. So hopefully some of the discussion this evening will give you some further ideas about how you can do that. So as I said, it's a key component of education state. The department's really committed to it, and the Minister is, it's very much on his agenda. So what I'd like to talk about now is levels of student participation. So this was developed some years ago. It's a researcher called Hart who came up with this idea of a ladder of participation. So it starts at the bottom with the first three rungs on the ladder being manipulation, decoration, and tokenism. So it's this idea that students can participate in different ways. So we may, for example, have a student put into a protest and being asked to carry a placard, but they don't really know a lot about the issue or it's not really their opinion or them having a say. They're just being asked to participate, or they're dressing up for some sort of the second run, decoration. They may dress up and dance around, for example, for some cultural celebration, but not really have engaged with the particular issue. The first three rungs, the bottom three rungs of this ladder of participation, Hart considers non-participatory, that's really hard to say, approaches. From there, from the fourth rung up, it outlines different degrees of participation. So the top rung is considered best practice, where students are informed, advocating on an issue that is of concern to them, and actively participating. So this is what we're aiming for. So this very much aligns to, and if you've not already seen it, the FISO Continuum of Practice. So this is a fantastic tool. Can I just have a hands up of who is familiar with the Continuum of Practice? There's a few hands there. Okay. Okay. If you've not already had a look, I encourage you to do so. So Tamara, the FISO homepage, is that the best place? Yes? Okay, on the side navigation bar on the right-hand side of the FISO page, there's a link to the Continuum of Practice. So within the Continuum of Practice, it's similar to this model, Hart's model, but it's been contextualised for Victorian context and just outlines 4 levels, ranging, you can see at the bottom, emerging, evolving, embedding, and excelling, and it describes practices in student voice in different areas. So you can use this tool to have a look and gauge where you think your school is at the moment, and where you would like to be. And you can start thinking of ideas from there about how you're going to get there. It's a fantastic tool that really draws on this sort of idea, ranging from sort of tokenistic ideas of participation to genuine active student voice. So if you've not already done so and you're looking to enhance your student voice practices, I encourage you to take a look at that. How am I going? Okay. This is the department has been working with the VicSRC on an issue. This is just to provide you with one example, an issue that has been of concern to students. Students brought this issue to the Deputy Premier, and we've been undertaking some research and work with the VicSRC to see how we can address the issue. The issue is about having student representation on school councils, on school governance boards. So at present, students are able to participate on school boards and school councils, but through a particular mechanism. They can be co-opted as community members. Anyway, we're working with the VicSRC to examine this current approach and practice, and to see how if any changes can be made to further support student participation. Anyway, I thought this was a really useful tool to have a look at. It outlines the different modes of student participation on school council. So we've found through the research and through talking with schools that yes, indeed, a lot of schools do have student participation on school councils, but the practices are really different. Some are really genuine forms of participation, and others are less so. Others are a little bit more tokenistic. So a student may be there, may be present, may be observing, may submit a report to school council, but are they actively engaged? Are they actively involved? And are their views equal to that of other members of the school council? So this just visually represents that idea, drawing on that idea of Hart's model of participation. Okay, so just outlined here some benefits and challenges of student voice. So I'll leave it to you to read them. I won't read them out for you all. So you can see there are a number of benefits. There are also challenges. So one of the challenges that I've already talked about is the idea of collective representation. And I really push this because we have seen some practices in some schools where, the SRC captain or the school captain sometimes is the most popular student in school. So we're trying to encourage schools to work with students to raise awareness about the idea of representation and working so students can work to garner the views of their peers and then take forward issues that are important to the whole school community. Okay. All right, so I brought some data about student voice in Victorian schools. So this is collected through the August supplementary census, where we ask all government schools a number of different questions, and one section relates to student voice. So the graph at the top is 2014 and 15 data, so it's a comparison. So the second chart, it's cut off, but that should actually say student representative councils. So as of 2015, 83% of Victorian government schools had an SRC or similar body. So that's fantastic. We'd love to get it to 100%, and hopefully with the work we're doing at the moment, it will continue to rise. Well, it actually is continuing to rise. I don't have all of the data for 2016, but I just pulled out the number of SRCs in primary and secondary schools, and we can see that it has increased slightly in 2016, so that's great. And this outlines a number of different areas of student voice. So Krista and the students may touch on student-led professional development for teachers through a program that they run called Teach the Teacher. So I'm expecting 2014 and 15, there were 9% of schools participated in such activities and programs. I expect that this year that will be much, much higher, given the work that the VicSRC have been doing. Okay, finally, I'd just like to finish with a bit of an outline of the department's support through different programs and relationships for student voice. So as I said, we work really closely with the VicSRC. So we have an agreement with them and work on a number of different initiatives. Last week was the VicSRC Recognition Awards. So if you're not familiar with the VicSRC, you're going to hear a lot more about, well, you'll hear from them shortly, but I really encourage you to take a look at their webpage. They've got a lot of fantastic video clips and pictures and case studies from students. So they've got also fantastic resources online. So I'd encourage you to take a look. Also on the department's webpage, there are a number of case studies from students about best practices in student voice in schools in a number of different areas. So SRCs, group action, advocacy work, individual student leadership, and also there's some case studies there from teachers. So often there's a teacher advisor, SRC advisor in schools. So there's some information there also. Also, the department supports a parliamentary program. So at both the primary and secondary level. So that involves students coming into the Chamber of Parliament, so and Queen's Hall in Parliament House. And it's fantastic. They sit in the chamber where all of our members of parliament sit. No adults are allowed in the chamber. We all sit up in the media gallery. And the students debate an issue that is important to them. Each year the issue is decided on by students. So this year the primary school issue was related to social media. And students came up with a proposition. It was that all social media should be banned for students under 12 years old. So it was fantastic. We got some expert speakers to come in. Students worked in groups and then came up with resolutions which were then voted on. And the findings of those conventions are then fed back to the Minister for Education, and he responds to them. We have also recently set up a departmental student voice working group. So that's really about student voice. We're trying to mainstream it a little bit and make it become everybody's business. I mean, so many areas within the Department of Education and indeed schools, you all work with students, so it should be everybody's business to consider how can we include a student's perspective in this work. Okay, I'm going to finish there because I'm aware of the time, but thank you very much for coming and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Krista Seddon, who's the manager of the VicSRC. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thanks for having us here today. I'd like to just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow panellists, Sean, Leah, Gerard, Spence and Danai. And also just a special shout out because I noticed quite a few VicSRC member schools on Polycom, Portland and Bramhill, and also in the audience I met a woman from Brunswick, which is another great supporter school of VicSRC. I wanted to begin today just by sharing a story. Peter Hutton, some of you probably know him, the principal of Templestowe College, speaks about schools currently working for about a third of students. He says school is currently working really well for about a third. For the middle third, he says that students are kind of going along, not particularly engaged, not particularly inspired. And for the final third, we know from news reports and data that there's a huge cohort that are dropping out of school altogether. And when I reflect on my own personal schooling back in the day, I would say I would fit into that middle third. You know, for me, I went through school and for the most part, I wasn't particularly inspired or engaged. And what the key turning point for me was being involved in my school SRC and also being elected as president, you know, in my final years. For me, the experience to be involved in student voice at that age, it allowed me to create opportunities for other students to have a say. It increased the visibility and the standing of students on school council. We successfully restructured our constitution and we got that approved by our school council. And the experience was personalised. That's what was really powerful about it. It tapped into my passion for creating change. It gave me agency and voice, and in doing so, I think it also increased my engagement with school. I share this story with you today because I think for me it was really the first step in my journey to become a teacher and to become an educator and to become a champion for student voice. Over a decade later, I've taught in secondary schools around Victoria, and I've also had the pleasure of working and leading the Victorian Student Representative Council, VicSRC. We believe in a world or an education system that is student-led, is student-driven, and is student-focused. And we exist to empower all student voices in education. We support students to become adults, decision makers, and future leaders. And the most rewarding part of my role is that I report to a board of 15 school-age students that are elected annually to represent the views and the voices of students across our state. For the last 11 years, we've primarily worked with secondary school students, but we're really looking to expand our work with primary school students. I'm going to let our students show you and tell you a little bit more about our work.
That thought of being able to do something is the most appealing thing in the world. We are the Victorian Student Representative Council, so we represent all students across Victoria.
There's 15 of us. We've got a requisite that we have to have 5 boys, 5 girls, 5 regional and 5 metro, and it really provides that diversity. It's a great experience to actually be able to work with these kinds of people.
You can't help but smile in meetings. You can't help but, really engage with the stuff you're doing. You feel empowered, I think.
It is adults and students working in partnership to transform the nature of their education system and their education experiences.
We don't talk about anything in the education space without sort of going, well, let's see what VicSRC have to say about that. They're in touch with the students on a daily basis. Let's tap into their intel.
Congress is like an extravaganza of student voice. People from all around Victoria come to share their ideas and their opinions on things that matter to them. We, the students, get to voice our opinions on things that will affect us for the next year.
You have politicians coming, you have people who can make decisions, people who have power, and they're coming and they're listening. And they seem just as passionate about the same topic of student voice as we are.
It's just so important for government to directly hear from students. So the issues they'll debate, I want to hear about them, and I want to make sure that student representative bodies are involved in education policy in this state.
Teach the Teacher is a student-led program that was written by students for students.
It's a program implemented to help improve the relationship between students and teachers and create just an environment for the school and the community where everyone can have a voice, everyone can have a say.
This is the 12th of 12 conferences that have run across the state over 2 terms, which have involved close on 1,000 students.
Definitely I want to take back lots of the things we've learnt and put it into our meetings. I'm definitely really excited about going back and just putting it into our meetings.
Tonight's the Recognition Awards, which is an event that the VicSRC holds every year, recognising primary and secondary students. So people that have really done a lot to help improve student voice in their school, their community and our state.
VicSRC is considered one of the main stakeholders within the Department of Education. So we meet with the Department of Education on a monthly basis and actually feed into sort of any upcoming policy agenda that the department's considering.
Students need to be known as not just the leaders of tomorrow, but we are the leaders of today.
Politics is looking pretty bright if this is the bunch that's going to head through and make their way.
We all have this human right of speech, but it's how we use it which is really important.
So that really captures the work that we do and the breadth of the work that we're doing across Victoria. And I should say we're a very small team. We have 3.5 staff members and an amazing group of students, past and present, that work with our organisation, and a great team of volunteers. So we couldn't do it without sort of all of these people that rally to sort of champion student voice alongside us. Echoing comments from Leah earlier, we really believe students have a lot to tell us about teaching and learning. And today I want to talk not so much about why we should listen, but more share 2 strategies on how we can listen. The first one I want to talk to you about is a resource we developed 12 months ago. It's already there. Called Student Voice in the Education State. And we developed this about 12 months ago in response to the release of the FISO, the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes. And essentially, the document looks at all of the 6 initiatives. And what it does is it says, we recognise that student voice it's fantastic that the government has put a standalone initiative of student empowerment and building school pride. That's excellent. But we believe that student voice should be mainstreamed through all 6 initiatives. So whatever your school is choosing to focus on, this document provides you with some really high-level, interesting, inspiring, hopefully, strategies of how you could embed student voice within any of those strategies that you're working on around the FISO. It's quite a high-level document, but it's really that opportunity to go, that's a kind of inspirational idea. I think that we could trial that at our school. I want to talk to you just about a few different strategies that I've pulled out from this document, talking about some formal ideas and some more informal ideas. Leah touched earlier on the push that we have at the moment around having students formally represented on school council, and she mentioned that we've just finished an academic research report with Deakin University, the Department of Ed and VicSRC. We interviewed principals, students, and also had student researchers sort of co-researching on this project. And I think the findings will be released in about a month alongside a resource which can be used for school councils to basically audit how they're travelling in terms of student participation. Some of the other strategies there around students on interview panels, they're not necessarily new ideas, but there's some really fantastic practice that's happening around Victoria. I'd point to Nossal High School and Templestowe as well in terms of the way that they conduct their teacher interviews, and then they make sure that students feed into those processes. And really simple things like making sure that students are trained up on, respectful interview practice techniques and discriminational law before they go into the interview process. And time again, I hear teachers and PRINs saying to us that students understand their school culture and they are really good at choosing people that are going to be the right fit for their school culture. In terms of some of the other strategies, simple things like if you're designing a new curriculum, get students to come on board that curriculum committee. Like, don't keep it a closed space for just that sort of leading teacher team or the PRIN team that's working on those strategies. Like, there's some schools that sort of have an open door policy when it comes to curriculum committee meetings. It's open to teachers that are interested and it's open to students that are interested. And I think that kind of openness can really create a great discussion and hopefully good curriculum. In terms of a program of getting feedback on teaching and learning, I'd point to Auburn High School. They've got a French stream where every term students participating at every year level in that French stream sit down with the principal and one of their key teachers, and a few students feed back on how they've been travelling that term, how they feel like their teacher's been going, their teacher's able to feed back on how the student cohort's going, and they're able to have a really productive conversation about some strategies that would benefit that whole cohort of students. Simple strategy, but I think the key thing is about creating that space to have those conversations within your school context. Some informal strategies that I want to talk to you about. It's really about starting small. I think sometimes if you have a win, it can really increase the appetite for student voice and the value of student voice across the school. So things like engaging your SRC in a discussion about teaching and learning. I've got something there about engaging students that are not normally the engaged ones that put their hands up to participate in these kind of opportunities. There's a colleague of ours, Roger Holsworth, who's been working in this space for many, many years, and he puts out a magazine called Connect Magazine, which is free to download, and it can be sent to your inbox every 2 months. It's a great resource if you're working in this space because he documents best practice from all around the world, but particularly Victoria, around sort of case studies of student voice. So I'd really point to that resource to kind of guide you in some different ideas. The Student Voice in the Education State resource is available to download off our website under the policy section. And I recommend you sharing it with your PRIN or with your colleagues, hopefully to stimulate a conversation about how student voice could be started or expanded within your school. The second strategy that I want to talk to you about today is the Teach the Teacher program. We wanted to create a program that encouraged schools to move away from that top-down model of schooling and create a school culture that really valued the collective genius of teachers, principals and students and parents. I think they're a group that we miss a lot. Schools should be a place where students are recognised as experts of their education, and this program really supports schools to create spaces to foster that. It empowers students to feel confident to speak up about their education, about teaching and about learning. And it empowers teachers to sometimes step back, let go and listen. And I feel like I can say that because I am a teacher and I've been a teacher. And I think sometimes the hardest thing is to just listen and not try to control and just to hear those voices that we don't hear. To address these challenges, VicSRC created the Teach the Teacher program, written by students in 2013 now, I think, or 2012. It's a student-led PD program where everyone has a voice. Teach the Teacher creates that space in schools where students and teachers and principals can connect, they can explore ideas, and they can share in a constructive, judgment-free environment. By giving students a greater say in their education, Teach the Teacher aims to create a positive community for all. These ideas about creating a culture of openness and communication in schools and classrooms have been around for decades. Research done by Garth Boomer and others in the 70s talked about the importance of students and teachers co-creating learning back then. So they're not new ideas. But this work really established Australia as a leader in this space. This program, Teach the Teacher, extends this approach from individual classrooms to a whole school context. It values student voice, and the program enables students and teachers to form partnerships to transform a school culture. And it really re-envisaged the student-teacher relationship to be about partnership. Again, I want to share with you a video because our students, again, can capture it much better than I can.
Teach the Teacher is a student-led program that was written by students for students.
It's a program implemented to help improve the relationship between students and teachers and create just an environment for the school and the community where everyone can have a voice, everyone can have a say.
It's about having a conversation. That's all it is. It's about having open conversations. So as opposed to teaching, we're exploring, we're discovering, we're trying to open up the field so that teachers and students can question together.
Teachers giving students feedback and students giving teachers feedback to improve student engagement, student motivation, student welfare in classrooms and outside the classroom as well.
Teach the Teacher isn't about students teaching teachers how to teach. We recognise that teachers know how to do that very well, but what they don't or may not understand is the perspective of the student.
Students are the ones with the unique perspectives. They are in that classroom every single day, looking through the content, worrying about exams and things like that.
And for some, it's the first opportunity they have to actually listen to their students, hear their feedback, but then turn it into a two-way conversation where they're both hearing each other's perspective. Traditionally, education has been teacher-orientated and teacher-directed. This is a time and a place where students are able to actually drive the conversation, drive the topics, and drive change to make education even better.
I feel like I'm creating the next step. I feel like I'm creating a legacy. Even if my name isn't written on any of the posters, I know that in 25 years I can look back and see Teach the Teacher thriving and go, I was part of that first movement.
So I wanted to share quote with you from a student in year 11, and she said, "Teach the Teacher has been an eye-opener for me because it allowed me to see and understand and appreciate the art of teaching and learning." And I think that that is one of the key outcomes of this project, is that it actually, while it creates that space, it's powerful for both students and teachers, because often students are sitting on one side of the fence and don't understand all of the hard work and thought processes that happen behind the scenes. And often teachers don't take that moment to just step into what's the perspective of the student throughout their 6-hour learning day while they're at school. I want to end this short presentation with an email that I got from a second-year teacher just last week, and it was so gold that I thought, what a great story to share with you all. So I'm going to read it because I don't want to miss the nuances. So she wrote, "A lot has happened down my side of town with regards to student voice, and I didn't know who else to excitedly share it with you, except you. So after a confusing and murky 6 months of not really knowing where we fit in the school, in August we finally found our place, working alongside the head of English to audit and seek student feedback on the English curriculum. The end goal of this project would be for student leaders to deliver a report to the English staff members about their findings. Never been done before at our school. The questions from the surveys and focus groups were developed by students. There were definitely moments where I felt like I just wanted to ... do it all myself, but I took a leaf from your book and I entrusted them to their devices, not doing much besides rephrasing a few questions. They also ran focus groups with their own groups of students from each year level. On Monday, the students, unsurprisingly, were amazing. They were professional, they were authentic and genuine, providing analysis on the data they found through the surveys alongside qualitative data from focus groups they'd run. They also provided some application for teachers to take on board in response to the feedback. And I know I don't quite have the right, but I just felt really proud. After the students presented, there was a general sense of excitement from the staff who were working on developing the 2017 curriculum. I overheard people referring back to the data that students had presented, and they said things like, "Wow, we can really use this in the development of our work." The PRIN also commented that students commended the students and indicated a keen interest to pursue student voice movement further throughout the college. I'm so glad it's worked, and especially since, she felt a little bit deflated by figuring out where it fit within her school. It's great to see such a change. So I suppose the 3 very short take-home messages that I want to leave the whole group with today is that we know our students have a lot to tell us about teaching and learning. We just need to have the courage to create those spaces and strategies to listen. Whatever initiative you're working on within the FISO, I encourage you to think about how student voice can inform that work. And finally, I encourage you to start small. You don't need to transform your whole school approach to student voice overnight. Choose one strategy. Consider how it best fits within your own school context. Start small, have a win, and then use this experience to leverage off other ideas and to expand this work. These outcomes set the stage for students and teachers to learn together and, most of all, test out ideas as collaborators in teaching and learning. These outcomes set the stage for us to create an education system that responds to the many rather than the few. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of introducing my 3 colleagues. First up is Gerard, Felipe, who's in year 11 from Frankston High School, and he's also the first student to be ever elected as the chair of our organisation, which is a new step for us. So please welcome Gerard.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. So, I'm Gerard Felipe. I'm 17 years of age, believe it or not. I am year 11 at Frankston High School. So what does good teaching look like? Like many of us, we believe that good teaching is recognizing or acknowledging that teaching is one of the best ways of learning, because learning is a two-way process and a two-way street. Just like this morning, I had a friend who was in my class, and all of a sudden, the teacher was asking our feedback on particular particular topics we are studying. And I think when he turned towards me, he said, the feeling of having our voices and our input heard is one of the best feelings. When students like myself feel that our opinions and our input are valued, we are more likely to respond to our highest potential. And those are one of the things we believe encompasses very good teaching. And I think it's also important to relate theory with life. Those are one of the best ways of teaching as well. When you relate the theory with life, you're more likely to relate with the student on a more deeper level. We've received data from 350 students regarding the Teach the Teacher program. And I'll give some quotes. I'll give some quotes from Copperfield College. A good teacher is someone who, and I quote, respects students' opinions, communicates with their students, and thinks outside the box. So that's from Copperfield College. We do have another from Shepperton Secondary College, where one of the students said, a good teacher is someone who celebrates achievements, and a good teacher is someone who gives you constructive feedback. So when I say learning is a two-way process, we do want to be involved, and we do want to share our opinions and exchange our ideas together. So that's one of the good teaching methods, I guess, and one way that we could be more active in our role in education. So yeah, I guess the message that I would like to leave behind is that students are willing. Students are willing to learn as well, and students would benefit from realizing that teaching is also a part of learning. And I know that because I'm mentoring a student from year 10, and I know that whenever I teach him, I do learn a lot of things, and I do make a lot of mistakes. And I'm glad he does pick me up on that, and I think that's one of the valuable moments you could have when teaching. So thank you.
So coming into tonight, I guess we were tasked with the topic of what could students teach us about good teaching practice. And I was thinking about this question for quite a while, actually. And I was really stumped, actually. Not because I didn't know what a good teacher was, but I was trying to go through and analyse, I guess, all of the different traits that all of my different teachers had and try to put them together into what would be the best teacher of all time. And that took me ages. So I thought of perhaps a faster way to do it, and this was asking myself, which classes engage me? You know, which classes really grab my attention and make me want to be there and make me want to learn? And then which classes didn't do that? Which classes almost turned me away from education? Now, I thought of an instant example for both of these in my daily schooling, and I'm sure as teachers you'll know students who perhaps feel the same way. And I thought the easiest to think of was, of course, as always, the bad. And this came in the form of maths. I'm pretty sure all teachers know that students don't really like maths, and I was trying to think, well, why is this? Is it just because everyone hates maths? And I don't think that's the case, because I love maths. But the class, I can't stand being there. So I had a little think about what the classroom was like, what it was like to be there in that room with the teacher. And I found it was very much factorized, if that makes sense. Not factorized in the sense of fractions and maths, but factorized as it was like factory. All of the students were in rows. It was a pretty dull classroom, no talking, no colours. Everything was very dreary, and the teacher was standing up writing things on the board, delivering it to students. And we were just sitting there and taking that education, writing it down in our books, taking notes, maths doing all of these different equations of the same kind. And we got really, really bored because we did the same format of a quadratic equation about 20 times in a row. And we'd given up at that point. It was boring. None of us wanted to be there, and we ended up stopping learning. And you could see we've had a better maths teacher before. People's grades instantly dropped. I was watching a movie before called Most Likely to Succeed about the education system, and it found that a school that does things like that, while it's good for rote learning, they brought the same students back that before got an average B plus A minus in their finals exams. 3 months later, the average score was an F. So not only is this not engaging students, but it's not working. students aren't learning. So then I was having a think about what makes a good classroom. You know, what engages me as a student, makes me want to learn, makes me want to be in that classroom. And I instantly thought of English. I'm not particularly good at English. I hate creative writing. But we have a really excellent teacher. I don't think I can say his name, but I'm going to use a pseudonym here and call him Brendan. Now, what Brendan did was he allowed us as students to be able to sort of direct where we wanted to take our English. Of course, we had a curriculum of things that we had to get across. We had to read these 2 books, Slaughterhouse-Five and Romeo and Juliet, and we got that across pretty quickly. That was all done in about just over a term and a half, maybe a semester. And now the rest of it was completely student-directed. You know, he'd give us a topic, we're going to do sort of debating. And then we were almost left to our own devices. You know, not in the sense that he didn't care anymore, not in the sense that he didn't want to pay attention to what we were doing, but he let us come up with our own topics, do our own research, format it in the way that we wanted to, and then he let us take it wherever we wanted. Of course, he would come in and do feedback and help, and he'd still help us learn, but we learned how we wanted to. And even before we had this self-directed where we'd go off by ourselves, this was, I suppose, epitomised to me in one situation. And it's going to sound a little weird, but we sat in a circle. And that was something that it seemed a lot bigger to me than it probably should, but it wasn't just the tables were arranged in a circle and he still stood up the front and he was still telling us things, but there were no tables. It was a circle of chairs and he was on one of the chairs as well. He was on the same level as the students. He spoke less than we did. And we got to, I suppose, direct where that conversation went. And this is hugely different from that maths class that completely pushed me away. This meant that, you know, I wanted to be in the classroom. This good teaching brings me back into the classroom, you know, 3 times a week, and it makes me want to learn English, which is, I suppose, now why my English grade is quite a bit higher than my maths grade. And it all goes to that good teaching practice. And that brings up the idea of what Gerard and the others were talking about, is that education is a 2-way stream, you know? It's not a teacher delivering education to a student, but it's a student and a teacher working together for the best student outcomes. And I think the biggest message that we can get from what makes good teaching practice isn't just what the teacher does in the classroom, it's what the teacher doesn't do. And I'm just going to leave you on that. Thank you very much.
I'm Danai and I'm in Year 11 at Frankston High School. So to begin with, before talking about what I want to speak about, I wanted to ask and wanted someone to respond to this question. Anyone that's willing to answer this. Like, as a teacher or someone in your school, your best interest is obviously your students. What is your biggest fear when it comes to you leading your students and why?
I'd say my biggest fear would be that students would be bored in my class. I would hate that. Really hate it. Yeah.
Was there anyone else as well?
I'd be worried that students would ask for things that I wouldn't be able to give, you know, as a principal. So you want the student voice, but, you know, you can't deliver on what they would want.
Okay. So seeing these answers, it's a correlation between the two. It comes back down to the students and how they want to be able to learn and how they are best suited in an environment. So as a student myself, how I identify an ideal learning environment and a teaching style that suits me is based on 3 elements. Your first element is passion. Teaching without passion is like a dream without a goal and a goal without a direction. Good teaching involves the characteristics of someone who, regardless of the teaching environment, their passion overcomes that for the subject, and what they do is so prevalent in their teaching. There is nothing worse than being taught in a classroom where the teacher just doesn't care and you just wonder what their purpose for teaching really is, when there's no connection and there's a lack of passion between the student and the teacher themselves. That's a really big element that sets the good, mediocre styles of teaching apart from the great teachers and the best teachers. Passion with teaching is adapting yourself in a classroom environment where all students feel they want to learn, and regardless of how they can learn, can amount to something bigger. So my second element, just as I mentioned before, is your purpose. What's your reason for wanting to lead in a classroom? What's your reason for wanting to lead in a school? What's your reason for wanting to teach, and what motivates you and why? The importance of knowing your reasoning sets and lays down the foundation and a bar for you to follow. Allowing yourself to have that foundation enables your teaching style to build and adapt to the need of students. There are so many people that teach, but not for the right reasons. But a fact that I can apply to myself is that when I know a teacher is teaching because they want to and they know their purpose and they're passionate, it encourages good teaching and it encourages for me as a student to be motivated and wanting to come into that classroom. And my third element that I had, which is really important, which ties in with both, is determination. Determination, passion, and purpose all link together to create good teaching. Determination is the driving force behind passion and purpose and develops a strong level of teaching that benefits not only the teacher themselves, but the students as well. Determination is more than just about seeking higher goals for oneself. It's the understanding of wanting better for those being taught and pushing them to their greatest maximum abilities. So if you wanted to apply 3 things to yourself when you're teaching or leading your school, just think of DPP, determination, passion, and purpose. So for me, a personal story of my greatest teaching experience would probably, or learning experience, my time that I really enjoyed coming to school was probably in year 9 and 10, as I'm currently in year 11 undergoing VCE currently. So both year 9 and 10 for me were quite strenuous, as I'd unfortunately become ill and spent 3 months in the hospital. And most of year 10 I was just in and out of hospital, so I was barely at school as it was. But for me, why those years were so great for me, because there was a difference I learnt in teachers when it came to accommodating for my learning styles and the needs I had. There was those that cared, but they essentially babied me in what they could do for me. They felt scared to push me to my maximum and scared to push me to my abilities. But then that set them apart from the best teachers and the most amazing teachers I've ever had. The best teachers I had were those that saw the potential and the greatness besides my circumstances, and whilst they still kept my health in mind, they pushed me to be able to push past my circumstances and still do amazing things within the school and within the community. It was about the teachers who knew about what their purpose was for teaching, and that was about letting me and other students go through things and they enable for myself and others not to let our situations define who we are, but just as a small bump that would push us to strive for even better. It's about the teachers during the time that were so passionate and determined to help me achieve my academic and extracurricular goals that moulded me to be the student I am today. Teaching is more than just standing in the classroom and retelling content. Teaching is about learning the differences of people and styles in the room and now allowing that to help design a teaching mechanism for oneself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the difference between those teachers, like I said before, there were teachers that cared, sure, but they didn't push me to do better. And the most amazing teachers that I still remember to this day, who might still not teach at my school anymore, even though it's been a year, they saw the situation I was in, but they still pushed me to what they knew I could do. They didn't let that situation that I was in stop me from being able to achieve goals. And that's something I can apply to myself in the future, to know that in the future, obviously after high school, it's not going to be easy. But because of those teachers, I've learnt to be moulded into someone that can still push past those difficulties and strive for even better.
Round of applause. Thanks, Gerard, Spencer and Danai. It's wonderful to hear the voice of students here at the Bastow Institute. It's been a great opportunity to actually hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Our topic today is what our students can tell us about good teaching. And so in a moment, I'm going to throw a question at you, and I'll throw it to Krista first so that you guys can get a chance to think more than she does. One of the quotes in the video, the very last quote in the first video we watched said, I believe this is what I said, quote, "We have this right of speech, but it's what we do with it that counts." And what I'm wondering from our panellists, and starting with Krista, is what are the best examples of students doing something powerful with their voice about teaching?
Look, I want to share some of the stories that have come out of the Teach the Teacher program. So you saw those snapshots, and I suppose what's great about the program, or traditionally I think when we talk about voice, student voice, SRCs tend to do quite tokenistic things like fundraising and casual dress days. And the Teach the Teacher program allows that group of students to actually shift the conversation to have some meaningful input into teaching and learning. So some of the best examples of student having a voice to talk about teaching have been outcomes of that. So 2 really small examples. A school over in the western suburbs did the program several years ago when I was supporting the training. And one of the things that came up in the conversation between students and teachers was how frustrating that the students found the learning objectives that the teachers put on the board. And they said so often the teachers will just come in and either they're already written up from the class before and they don't change it, or, they're just kind of like there and they're not really sure what that meant. And the teacher said, yeah, we really struggle to sort of make them purposeful and meaningful and all of this kind of stuff. And so together they identified this as a small but powerful issue within their classrooms. And the students actually led a process of developing like a 1-page template that students and teachers could use in that school in the first few minutes of each class, where the students and teachers could sit down together and develop those learning objectives and those learning intentions, to make sure that both the teachers and students were on board with them. And I think that's a small example, but a powerful example of how student voice can really influence our learning environment.
Thanks, Krista. Gerard, in your experience, your personal experience as a student, what's been the opportunities you've seen where students, it may have been yourself or someone else, has used their voice powerfully to impact upon teaching?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm glad you asked that because just this morning I was in English, and my English teacher, she doesn't usually ask for feedback. And I remember a few months ago, I was telling her, Miss, you know what we need? We need students, giving feedback on the things that matter to us and so on. So I was complaining to her, and then today, all of a sudden, so, class, what do you think of the book we're reading? I said, oh, that's good. Oh, so what else? What other books do you think we should, bring in next year? I said, oh, that's a change in circumstance. And that's why I was relating to my friend a while ago. He said, you know what? He had a very good feeling. He said, well, hang on a minute. She's usually not like this. And that's when you realize that, hang on a minute. When our voices do feel like are valued, and when we do feel like our opinions are taken seriously, we feel great, and we're more likely to reach that higher level in our outcomes. And I think that's one of the best ways. I think the most simplest way is going up to your teacher and saying, Miss, we would like to give you some feedback. And that's the most simplest way you could use your voice. It doesn't have to be dramatically high. It can be in the most simplest form possible. So, yeah.
Thanks very much, Gerard. I'd say can be a brave thing to go to your teacher and say, I've got some feedback for you. Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Spencer, what's an example from your experience or from a friend of yours who's used their voice to give good quality feedback to their teachers?
This one's not so much feedback, and I'm going to sound like a real hypocrite talking about this one because it was actually maths. But it wasn't the general stream of maths. It was a different maths class. Last year, year 9 for me, there was an extra class that you could take called Advanced Algebra, and that's if you really wanted to further your maths ability if you're thinking about taking specialist for VCE. This ran for the whole year, and for the first semester we had this one teacher, and she was pretty good. She was all right, what you'd expect from maths. And then she had to go and get a hip replacement, and so she was gone for the rest of the year. And so we got this new teacher come in, and she came up to us on the first day and she said, "Look, I know absolutely nothing about algebra. Before this, she was a health teacher, and I think she did humanities. So she had no idea. She didn't know what we were learning. She didn't know anything about the subject. I don't think she'd even picked up the textbook before, but there was nobody who could fill in that space." Now, where student voice comes into that scenario is that class was filled with a lot of the people that wanted to do maths. That class was filled with the people who had already known quite a bit about maths beforehand. And so what happened in that class was that we, as the student body, worked with the teacher to learn about the topic together. So often, at the same time we were learning about the things that we were learning, the teacher was as well. And so I think that really gave the student, us, I suppose, the knowledge that we could also actively participate in that learning environment. And it was a good lesson for the teacher too, because I don't think she'd been in a scenario like that where she didn't know anything. And I think it's really to her credit that she opened herself up like that to the students, us, to allow us to be able to feed back into that as well, to work together. Because it very easily could have gone terribly wrong where she tried teaching us about this topic that she knew nothing about, and that would have completely ruined, I think, the rest of the semester in that subject for us. So I think the best thing is, again, that idea of working together, and this works at that kind of micro level as well as the whole school level.
Thanks, Spencer. And Danai, finally, do you have an example for us?
An example that came to mind is this year, my history teacher, she approached a few people that were in our leadership council, and she asked us, so there's a group of Year 9 students that are really disengaged in school, and she just feels like they're about to drop out, and they're just really rowdy in class. And she just gave us the situation that she was in and how she can tackle that. So with her, we created a small mentor program, because it was just a select few of Year 11s. And in that mentor program, these Year 9 students, at first, they were just really disengaged, and they just felt like, why are we here? You teachers never listen to us anyways. This is why I hate school. This is why I'm going to drop out. And some of the things that the kids would say in that mentoring time we did after school on Wednesdays, it would really impact myself and other students, Year 11 students, because it was pretty sad to see that someone can hate coming to the place they're meant to be learning and enjoy themselves. It's meant to be the best few years of their life, and they dread coming to school every single day just because of the way their teachers tackle the situation. So what we did with my history teacher is we listened to them, we heard what they wanted to say, and usually people go when they want feedback, they go to the best students, they go to the students that are in the leadership councils, they go to the students that are getting straight A's. But it was a difference, like Krista mentioned before, like Roger Holdsworth says, it's better to get a voice of everyone. It's best practice to hear everyone, not just the best students. And just hearing that from the students, what they wanted to change in the school, how they wanted to impact their learning as well. And we took that feedback as well, and my history teacher collated that and said that in a staff meeting. And having their voices represented in the school is big as well, and it improves their learning, because now that their voices are being heard and teachers are accustoming to their learning styles, they're coming to this mentor programming and saying, because of you, miss, because of you guys in Year 11, I actually want to come to school now. It's just that big change of coming from, I hate this place, I would rather be dead than be here, and hearing such shocking things like that to hearing, this is why I come to school. You guys made school a better place for me. Just something that started off so small and to be as a fun thing just turned so big and changed their attitude to school was really impactful for not just them but for me as well.
Thanks, Danai. I'm going to pose the same kind of question to Leah, but flip it a little bit and ask, what's the best way for young people to engage with the minister?
Yeah, sure. I've been lucky enough to accompany some of the student executives, including Spencer and Danai and Gerard last week, to meetings with the Minister for Education. And I've been really impressed by the way actually both the students have conducted themselves and the Minister. It seems like a really genuine respectful exchange. And I think the reason for that is that it's really authentic. I don't think that the Minister treats you any differently than he treats other stakeholders that he meets with. He expects a lot from you, and I've heard students come into the Minister's boardroom and ask for large sums of money, which he may or may not have readily at his disposal. I think a really key thing with student voice is it's not about students always getting what they want or things having to change to be the way students think they should be. It's about dialogue and negotiation, and as you've all alluded to and discussed today. And I think when students have put forward proposals or asked for funding for certain projects, he asks, as he would with any stakeholder, for evidence and rationale and how it's going to benefit students or the education system. And the VicSRC then go away and work on proposals and craft and recraft and continue to advocate. And I've been really impressed with that. So encourage you to keep doing that. Sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe they just asked for that. But it's fantastic because you're brave and bold and authentic and respectful. So keep doing that. And I know the Minister really appreciates those meetings, and he honestly, and I'm not just saying this, takes it on board because it's fed back to the department. So a lot of what is discussed in your meetings and through your correspondence, engagement, emails, any form of interaction you have, it's fed back to us. And it's acted upon. So as much as it can be, as I said, it's not about you, any stakeholder group, getting exactly what they ask for all of the time. But where there are ways, we do try, and the Minister asks the department to work with you. So it may be in the form of other support. So, for example, there was an issue raised last week about raising the profile of the VicSRC and communications. And so the department was suggested the department could provide in-kind support, or you can work with our communications advisors. And so there are different ways. So I've been impressed with, the genuine, authentic, respectful communication.
So thank you all very much to all of the people who are here today in the audience at the Bastow Institute. Thank you also to all of our colleagues in tuning in via Polycom. Some of you from very, very far away, so welcome and farewell to you all. Can I have a round of applause for all of our panellists, please? Krista, Leah, Gerard, Spencer and Danai. Thanks. On behalf of all of us here, thank you very much and good night.